Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Tianlu. Coming up in this edition. Massive protests have erupted in Israel and a general strike has been called after 6 hostages were found dead in Gaza. Germany's far-right AfD party has won a state election for the first time since World War II. And China has elevated ties with several African countries after President Xi Jinping met African leaders attending this week's summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. We'll begin in the Middle East. Tens of thousands of Israelis have rallied across the country as they demand Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reach a ceasefire with Hamas and bring the remaining captives home.
Each and every citizen all around the world, I'm a simple citizen, go out to the streets and cry out, we can save people, we can save another human life. Of all the sides, we can save people.
On Sunday night, thousands of protesters set fire and blocked Tel Aviv's main highway. Israel's largest trade union further pressured the government by calling a general strike on Monday. Ben Gurion International Airport in Tel Aviv has suspended services. Dozens of municipalities, including Tel Aviv, have also joined Monday's strike. These mass strikes come after Israeli troops recovered the bodies of 6 hostages in Gaza. The retrieval was met with widespread anger and frustration over the stalled talks, which have been on and off for months. There are still 101 hostages in Gaza, with about half presumed dead due to either Hamas attacks or Israeli bombings. Nathan King reports.
This is a horrible reminder of the cost on both sides of this Israeli-Hamas conflict in Gaza. As we know, over 100 hostages were taken. Unfortunately, very few seem to be alive, and this is confirmation of the precarious nature. 6 found dead. We understand in southern Gaza, in a tunnel, just before it looked like an Israeli operation to free them, although we're relying very heavily on information we cannot verify from the Israeli Defense Forces and, of course, Hamas, who said they were killed in a deadly airstrike. Among them, an Israeli-American, one of the several American hostages to be held. And Joe Biden issued a statement, which I'm going to read here, basically saying this: I worked tirelessly to bring their beloved Hirsch, his name, safely to them, and I'm heartbroken by the news of his death. It's as tragic, is reprehensible, and we will secure the release of the remaining hostages. Now, that statement obviously heartfelt from the US president, but he only has a few months left of his term, and let's face it, it's been going on for months that we've been promised that there is some sort of ceasefire, some sort of hostage release in swap for Palestinian-held prisoners in Israel about to happen, and every time we come up to that point, something seems to happen. And let's face it, even though we saw demonstrations in Jerusalem straight after this, pressuring their own government, including especially Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, to work out a ceasefire deal to release the rest of the hostages that are alive and return the bodies of those who are not, the government of Israel and others in the region are basically doubling down on this seemingly intractable conflict after 11 months.
That was Nathan Kane on the protests and general strike in Israel. A UN-sponsored polio vaccination campaign is underway in central Gaza. It follows the first discovery of the serious disease in the enclave in 25 years in a 10-month-old baby. The ambitious vaccination effort comes amid a devastating conflict that has destroyed the Palestinian territory's healthcare system. Nadra Al-Tibi reports from central Gaza.
The Palestinian Ministry of Health announced the start of the campaign in central Gaza after the UN confirmed Israel had approved a series of humanitarian pauses to allow Palestinian children to be vaccinated against polio. The vaccination efforts will be not easy, while the goal is to vaccinate more than 90% of children across the Gaza Strip. The territory's roads are largely destroyed, its hospitals badly damaged, and its population spread into isolated pockets.
There will be field teams roaming all the neighborhoods and alleys of the Gaza Strip, including the camps for the displaced in their places of residence and in the places where few residents remain, in order to ensure that the vaccine reaches all children.
Fighting is expected to stop for 3 days at a time, so UN staff and local healthcare workers can administrate the vaccines in stages at sites in central Gaza, the city of Khan Younis in the south and the north of the Strip. Displaced Palestinians queue at this crowded vaccination site in Deir al-Balah city, hoping to protect their children who are faced with a lack of medical services and poor health conditions in displacement camps.
I came here to vaccinate my daughter because I fear for her from paralysis and viruses. The effects of the disease appear on her due to the polluted environment in which we live.
The UN says 1.2 million doses of polio vaccine have already arrived in Gaza, with more to come as vaccinations continue.
The discovery of the first polio case in Gaza in 25 years has prompted the international community to push for a temporary ceasefire, which Palestinians hope will be a prelude to a permanent ceasefire that will save all their lives.
That was Nadra Al-Tibi in central Gaza. In Europe, Alternative for Germany, or AfD, is poised to become the first far-right party in Germany to win a regional election since World War II. It took the lion's share of ballots in one eastern state and also made gains in the second state in the same region. This comes a year before Germany's federal elections. Peter Oliver has more.
Far-right Alternative for Germany will take up the largest proportion of the 88 seats that were up for grabs in the Thuringian State Parliament. They were always expected to improve on their 2019 result, but AfD, led by the controversial Björn Höcke, has surpassed some expectations, taking 33.8% of the vote. Höcke's close links to neo-Nazis and convictions for repeatedly using Nazi slogans popularised in the 1930s and 40s has not stopped AfD's rising popularity in the east of the country. Despite AfD winning the most votes, it's unlikely that other parties will be willing to form a coalition with them that would allow it to govern the state of Thuringia. This election also saw a swing towards the newest far-left party in Germany, the Sarah Wagenknecht Alliance, or BSW. They picked up 13.8% of the votes. While the mainstream parties have ruled out working with extremists, BSW's co-chair in Thuringia says they're open to dialogue.
I'm of the impression that we will be able to speak to one another and establish where compromises can be found. What is needed is a stable majority. We need to talk, but we must also preserve what our voters voted for.
In Saxony, the AfD came in a close second to the Conservative Christian Democratic Union, which won 31.9%. BSW received 11.8% in that state. It was a tough election for the ruling National Coalition. The Free Democrats didn't pass the 5% threshold needed to get into either parliament, while the Greens are out of the parliament in Thuringia. Chancellor Olaf Scholz's Social Democrats lost some ground in Thuringia and stayed about the same in Saxony. It's here in Thuringia that the real political earthquake is being felt, as AfD become the first far-right party to win the most seats in a state election in Germany since World War II.
That was Peter Oliver reporting. In Asia, China and South Africa have announced the elevation of their ties to an all-round strategic cooperative partnership for the new era. Chinese President Xi Jinping held talks with South African President Cyril Ramaphosa in Beijing. Ramaphosa is on a state visit to China from Monday to Thursday. He will also attend the 2024 summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. Meanwhile, China has elevated its relations with several African countries after President Xi met leaders attending this week's summit. China lifted ties with Togo and Djibouti to a comprehensive strategic partnership, and relations with Mali and the Comoros were upgraded to strategic partnerships. President Xi also met leaders of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Seychelles, Eritrea, and Guinea. This year's summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation runs from Wednesday to Friday. It is the fourth time since 2006 that leaders from China and Africa have met to discuss bilateral relations, global issues, and cooperation. Dongxue has more.
President of Chad, Mohamed Deby, arrived in Beijing on Monday morning, following a dozen of African leaders arriving in the Chinese capital since Sunday. They are here for the Forum on China and Africa Cooperation, scheduled to be held in Beijing from Wednesday to Friday. This year's edition is themed Joining Hands to Advance Modernization and Build a High-Level China-Africa Community with a Shared Future. Well, it is the fourth time since 2006 for leaders from China and Africa to meet and discuss bilateral relations, global issues, and most importantly, cooperation. While some believe Chinese engagement with Africa is mainly driven by a desire for the continent's natural resources, in reality, many experts and officials say that the relationship is multifaceted. Ahead of the forum, I had the chance to talk to ambassadors from the African continent, including South Africa's and Tanzania's. They both said they are very much looking forward to this year's forum to deepen cooperation and bringing benefits to local development in Africa. One thing worth mentioning is the Small is Beautiful plan. This year's FOCAC summit will be the first in the era of a reformed Belt and Road initiative built around the same slogan. The reformation became especially prominent during the Belt and Road Forum in October 2023 and is also expected to shape this year's FOCAC commitments. The small refers to more contained projects with smaller budgets but shorter repayment windows. The beautiful refers to the projects having both small environmental and social impacts with large developmental benefits. It was inspired by increasing awareness in China about the growing role of renewable electricity as a driver of Chinese growth. And that said, the Chinese Deputy Foreign Minister also said earlier at a media briefing that the summit will adopt two documents, the declaration as well as the action plan, to build a major consensus between the two sides and map out the implementation path of high-quality China-Africa cooperation in the next 3 years.
That was Dongxue reporting. Turning to South America, Brazil is experiencing a historic drought and wildfires in several parts of the country. Paulo Cabral reports from Sao Paulo.
These dramatic pictures show a fisherman carrying an Amazon freshwater dolphin that got stuck in the mud to a deeper part of the Madeira River. The Madeira is one of the many rivers in the Amazon region that are below their usual water levels for this time of the year due to a severe drought. The region in Brazil's central highlands, where the country's capital Brasilia is located, has not seen a drop of rain in 130 days. And there are many other examples. Meteorologists say at least 15 of Brazil's 27 states are facing their most severe drought in more than 4 decades.
The warming of both the air and ocean temperatures globally is significantly altering wind and rain patterns, particularly in Brazil. As a result, some regions that should be receiving more rainfall, such as the far north of the northern region and even Rio Grande do Sul, are not getting the expected rain due to these wind changes caused by global warming.
The drought sweeping across Brazil is not only a problem in itself, but it's also fueling devastating wildfires in several parts of the country.
João Godoy is a wildfire expert who has been training firefighters for more than 20 years. Godoy says climate change has made their challenges even greater, leading to the emergence of so-called sixth-generation fires. These intense and unpredictable fires occur in very dry areas with lots of organic material, such as a tropical forest during a drought.
All studies have shown the emergence of sixth-generation fires. These fires that spread very quickly with high intensity in vegetation, making them almost impossible to combat.
This year, the situation has become particularly dire in the Amazon, in the Pantanal region, Brazil's central wetlands and home to incredible biodiversity, and also in the countryside of São Paulo state. Several people have been arrested in connection with the fires, but it's not clear in each case whether whether the flames were started with intent on destruction or if they were controlled fires, such as those used to burn trash or clear a small pasture that went out of control.
We can no longer use fire as it was used in the past. The reality of climate change has created a new scenario, a new reality, which requires a change in behavior.
The length and severity of droughts have worsened with climate change. Dry vegetation and deforestation are not helping.
That was Paulo Cabral on the drought in Brazil. Finally, in North America, scientists agree that access to drinking water is becoming increasingly scarce in some parts of the world as the planet heats up. The Mexican capital is one of them. The city is located in the central and most populated part of the country. Mexican President-elect Claudia Sheinbaum has a plan to bring more clean drinking water to the people of central Mexico. Frank Contreras reports from Mexico City.
Despite heavy rains in recent weeks, hundreds of thousands of people in central Mexico, including Mexico City, struggle daily to get drinking water. Privately owned water trucks bring citizens living in Mexico City potable water. North of the capital lies the Tula River. For more than 100 years, untreated wastewater from Mexico City has been dumped into this river. Scientists who sample water from this river say it's filled with fecal matter and other contaminants that are harmful to humans. Mexico's president-elect Claudia Sheinbaum says she will clean it up, but she has yet to provide a detailed plan.
We will create a grand water plan for the central zone of Mexico, and we will recover the Tula River. We will clean it up and make Tula River's water drinkable.
Dr. Alma Chavez is a top environmental engineer. She leads a team of water quality researchers for Mexico's acclaimed National Autonomous University. Dr. Chavez has been studying the Tula River for nearly 30 years.
If they are going to treat it and make it potable water, then they will need to learn what contaminants in the water might harm the health of humans. At this time, we know there are certain salts that are not necessarily harmful to humans, but might damage crops and the soil.
The president-elect, who will be sworn into office on October 1st, so far has not said how she will finance a massive cleanup of the Tula River. Experts agree it will be expensive and time-consuming.
Of course, one factor that always complicates any effort to bring potable water to giant populations in urban areas is the sheer size of this and other megacities around the world.
That was Frank Contreras reporting. Recapping today's headlines. Massive protests and a general strike have engulfed in Israel after 6 hostages were found dead in Gaza. Germany's far-right AfD party has won a state election for the first time since World War II. And Chinese President Xi Jinping has been meeting African leaders attending this week's summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. Beijing elevated ties with several African countries following the meetings. That's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a 1-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Tianlu. Thank you for listening.